recording the podcast! Shut up!
Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it is Awards Hour for October 10th, 2024. My name is Bernie Burns, sitting right over there. Ashley Burns. How are you doing, Ash?
Look, just trying to keep him grounded.
Keep him grounded? Oh, I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
In our group chat, there's a picture of a house in Florida where I love this guy. He put tie-down straps on his house.
Like the world's biggest tie-down straps.
Yeah, where the hell do you get those?
And you thought they were trying to keep the roof on? I figured they were trying to keep the house down so it didn't fly away like Wizard of Oz or something.
It is funny perspective on things. We're going to talk about Hurricane Milton in a second, even though we're probably a little bit behind the time since we're recording this at about 4:30 in the morning Florida time.
Well, we're perhaps both behind the times and too early.
We're waiting to
out of time.
find information. When you're listening to this, you're going to be like, there's totally new information. But yeah, it was a perspective thing. So he had these giant tie-down straps over the top of his house and then anchored into the ground somehow. And my thing was, I was like, he's trying to keep his roof on, and it's a shingle roof, so good luck with that. But when you looked at it, you thought,
he's trying to keep the whole house.
Trying to keep the house from flying away.
I bet he went and got some sweet tent steaks.
But he got 2-foot ones, so they're definitely going to work.
Definitely.
I'm curious to see how it goes. I mean, you got to try something, right? Why not?
Sure. And beyond that, I also need to see how the houses on either side of him fared.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's perspective. You and I have talked about this before. Whenever you see an ambulance with the lights on and the siren going, that ambulance is going
to the hospital.
It's going to the hospital, right? And that means there's a person in it already
that needs to get there quick.
And they need to get there quick. When I look at an ambulance with the lights on and the siren going, to me, they're going to get someone who's in trouble, and I need to get out of their way because they need to get to that person.
Logically, that makes more sense. I feel like once you've got the EMTs there, stabilize the person as much as you can, and then drive safely to the hospital.
Yes.
And so you don't want to be rocking back and forth and banging at high speeds. So logically speaking, it makes more sense that the lights and the sirens would be someone getting to someone they need to treat. But in my head, it's still, they're on the way to the hospital.
I don't use that much logic on it either. I just think it's like a 50-50. It's either doing one or it's doing the other. But silently, internally, when we're all in our cars, we all make this judgment of what the ambulance is doing, but we don't talk about it with other people,
Right.
But I think that kind of thing is interesting to me. You're either it's going to the hospital person or it's going to get the person.
Right. It's like the poop wiping.
Okay. I didn't want to go there, but yeah, okay.
The people either stand up to wipe their butt or they sit to wipe their butt, and no one knows the other kind of person exists.
They're standing up to go to the hospital. Is what they're doing. That's why they're standing up. Okay. In serious news, though, Hurricane Milton has made landfall. It does look like it turned south a little bit right before it made landfall. Looks like it was affecting the city of St. Petersburg more so than Tampa, although there have been reports of flooding already. Hurricanes are interesting because a lot of times the hurricane hits and you don't really know quite what the damage is, and you might not know immediately anyway because it's so much water. I read recently that Helene dumped 4 trillion gallons of water on the east coast of the U.S.
That's an amount of water I can't even conceive. That's like an ocean.
They
dumped a little ocean.
I think the stat I read was that if it had put all of its water just on North Carolina alone, just the rainfall would have covered the entire state 3.5 feet deep in water.
Whoa.
But then you consider too and this is the thing with hurricanes, is the water runs off as water does over time, and then suddenly you have this huge swell. And you have water that's way deeper than 3.5 feet because it's all in one place or concentrated. It's not spread out across the state. And that's what we saw in some places in western North Carolina.
Yeah, and even if you have great drainage, nothing's going to stand up to that amount of water.
You can't make a case for that, I mean, the earth doesn't have the capability to drain that. Think about that.
Right.
Yeah. And the wild thing that I read about Hurricane Milton, this is all developing, as with every developing disaster. You should always check your local, up-to-date, reliable news sources, and not something that was recorded probably 4 hours earlier. But the thing that I read about it was that it spawned a record number of tornadoes as it was making landfall.
Is it, a boss?
Right. It sounds like a boss from Dark Souls, right? Listen to this. There was almost 100 tornado warnings on the west coast of Florida as this was making landfall. That's insane.
I didn't even know hurricanes made tornado babies.
I hadn't heard of that either. But I guess it would be not typhoons, water spouts that are making their way in, little cyclones, that are spun off of this thing. That's just insane to me.
Can you imagine that coming, the storm coming, and then also, just to make things interesting, a bunch of like water spouts separately rolling in over the coast?
It does. It's like how much worse can this possibly get? But when it did make landfall, it was Category 3 by the time it made landfall, and then quickly dropped to Category 2, which is
good.
It's better.
Well, it's hard to say good,
Right.
but it could have been worse. If it had stayed at that like high level Category 5, the devastation would have been much worse than what we're going to find it to be.
Hopefully. Also, you never know. It can just be like, where does it hit? Like meteorologist Steve was telling us that, just the rotation of this and the way that it comes to the coast, the rotation and the direction of it makes it worse than a quote unquote traditional, more common hurricane. We dealt with that too when I don't think you were with me, but I went to Christchurch after they had that massive earthquake. And when I was there, it was incredible devastation. I think I was there like 9 months, maybe a year after it happened. They were still like tearing buildings downtown. And the person who took me around in a cab, like a cab driver, offered to drive me around to show me parts of the city and things. And he said that the earthquake they had before that was actually a much greater magnitude of earthquake. The difference was this one was almost like directly under the city. So as opposed to everything shaking back and forth, everything was going up and down. And he said he never experienced anything like that before. You couldn't stand up. Like there were just people just laying in the street because they physically couldn't get up.
Right, like being on a trampoline that people are jumping on.
Yeah, and it was just because it was like the earthquake was right under the city. So it's one of those things, it's like there's so many factors you can't tell. You have to wait and see. So hopefully it dropping to a Category 2 means good things. The biggest thing we're seeing besides the tornado warnings is, well, there's a crazy story of about 6 p.m. our time yesterday, which would have been about 1 p.m. Florida time. Emergency services just said, hey, guys, we're not answering calls anymore. We're not going to respond to any calls, which is I get it, but it's a wild thing to hear. Like the cops and the firefighters say, you're on your own. Good luck.
Yeah, like if this is a mandatory evacuation, if you don't evacuate, you're on your own.
Yeah, but just getting that notification,
would be insane.
You're notifying
That's
everybody
like,
that cops are not on duty at the moment.
This is the end of civilization. You want to do a crime?
Now it's crime time.
It's crime time.
It's like hitting that incognito button on your browser. You got like 12 hours, go nuts. That would make for an interesting movie, actually. If there was like some kind of movie where there was a heist and they planned it right for when a hurricane's coming. I'm sure that has to.
No, that movie exists. Believe it or not, Bernie, I hope this isn't too on the nose. It's called The Hurricane Heist.
When did The Hurricane Heist come out? Do you have a year on that by any chance?
Yeah, it's 2018. So I don't know much about the movie.
Is Treat Williams in it? Who's the star of that? Billy Zane? That's a Billy Zane movie.
Who's in this? This is The Hurricane Heist with Ryan Quanten. I don't think I've heard that name since True Blood. Is that what he was in?
Oh.
And Ralph Ineson.
I haven't heard that name since 45 seconds ago.
It has a 5.1 on IMDb.
I'm sure he hasn't heard my name either, by the way.
But yeah, so that does exist where I guess they're trying to plan a heist for when a Category 5 hurricane hits. They're trying to like rob the mint.
They're really going to rob the mint. So it's a hurricane that would make sense. It's hitting the East Coast, and there's a hurricane that gets far enough up towards Maryland, Virginia, D.C. area, and then bam, they can pull a heist. So look, bookmark that for future income. This is not financial advice, everyone listening.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of what was that? It was on Netflix. I don't remember if it was a movie or a series, but it was the Dave Bautista where they decided to pull a heist in Las Vegas during the zombie outbreak. And if I recall correctly, is it a spinoff of the like?
It's a weird one because it's a Zack Snyder movie. It's called Army of the Dead.
Yes.
And
So it makes me think of, Dawn of the Dead and so on.
you might remember this conversation because we were looking up the lead in Fallout. What is her name?
Ella Purnell.
And remember, we talked about this movie a few months ago, you and I privately, because we looked her up and she was in that movie and neither one of us remembered her being in Army of the Dead.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of tempted to go back and watch that movie.
I watched it. You didn't even watch the first time, did you? You don't like zombie stuff.
Well, it depends on how fun it is.
Yeah.
Like I've watched Warm Bodies.
Oh, yeah.
The romantic action film with the zombie, and that's got the guy who went on to be Beast in X-Men, and also he was in The Great, which is a very fun series where he plays like insane Russian king.
What is the best zombie scene or movie ever?
Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, Shaun of the Dead for best movie.
Yeah,
Good call.
It's really hard to pass up a zombie rom-com.
Yeah, and it was far enough into the genre where a parody was good timing, right?
Yes, and it worked out really well. I felt like it like pulled off all its tropes. It told its stories. It like planted a lot of seeds and then came back and paid them off.
Yeah. It's like, you look at like Mystery Men, the Ben Stiller movie.
Loved that movie, actually.
People loved it, but how much better would that movie have done if it had come out after a few of the Avengers movies, Because it was almost too early to be a parody.
Right, like the superhero genre wasn't established enough to be parodying. There's actually a new show out on HBO, I think, called The Franchise that's about making superhero movies.
Yeah.
Which I've heard mixed things about it, but overall that it's pretty fun, so I kind of want to check it out.
That could be on the other end, though, where you're too far into it and people are sick of it entirely, which I think we're getting there with superhero movies. I think The Boys kind of nailed the timing of it pretty well,
Yeah, it did.
And I think they're also ending at the right time.
Right.
Yeah.
They're on the verge of overstaying their welcome, and then just being another superhero franchise, but are like they're bowing out, and I like that.
Army of the Dead is weird though because it's about a heist that takes place during a zombie outbreak in Las Vegas when Las Vegas is quarantined. Another weird connection, by the way. Tangent here.
Yeah.
The Tropicana Stadium in Tampa. I got to be careful what this is. The stadium, it had a fabric roof and it was torn off. And there was this whole thing about it because this is today. It was torn off by Hurricane Milton, and then people were erroneously thought that workers who were going to be relief workers were staged there, but they had already been moved out because the hurricane got beyond the structural capabilities of the building.
Okay.
So they'd already moved them out, but people thought like these workers had been suddenly exposed when the roof got torn off. It's weird though because it's Tropicana Stadium. Just like 2 days ago, the Tropicana Hotel in Las Vegas was just demolished.
Oh,
So
right.
it's weird.
They did demolish that, didn't they? That's you know what they were
Intentionally.
They were spiritually linked. Once the Tropicana went down, there was nothing holding that roof on.
It's an interesting coincidence, I think, yeah. Although I think they're making too big a production out of these demolition projects. Did you see when the Tropicana was imploded?
No.
It's like they had fucking drones out there, one of those drone shows, which I love. But I'm like, aren't the drones in danger from,
From shrapnel or like, yeah, you'd think so.
But and it's also, it's like, do we need to make this big of a deal over it? Like they literally had drones making like one of those like Wile Coyote plungers in the sky, to do demolition.
Yeah, that you know what? That's a bit much, but that's very Vegas.
I've also seen too many like wild demolition videos to ever go attend one of those in person. My favorite one is, I think it was the Weather Channel was streaming the demolition of some stadium. I don't remember what it was now. And they had a camera set up. It was a live stream. And it's like the 5, 4, 3, and then a bus pulls up right in front of the camera. Like a city bus pulls up.
Like stops?
Stops.
Oh,
and you even hear the camera guy go, "Get out of there, bus." And then you hear the explosion. And I think you can see the top of the stadium just disappear behind the bus. Everyone's cheering and everything. The smoke starts to settle and the bus pulls away. The bus had immaculate timing. It was, for a bus, it had the greatest comedic timing ever.
I wonder too if the bus driver was like, "Oh, what's going on here today?"
Oh, look, there's a building going down. How lucky am I? Get the perfect view of this. And then I've seen other ones where people are like, it seems like they're a half mile away from this building going down. The building goes down. They're all cheering. Like, that was crazy. Yeah, that was amazing. And then all of a sudden, a rock just comes flying through the crowd. This is what I will link in the link dump. But it's just like, if that thing had hit anybody, it would have been game over instantly. I mean, It's flying, like it's shot out of a cannon just flying through the crowd. And it's incredible, the people's reflexes to get out of the way of this thing. But wrapping up my tangent here. Back to Army of the Dead. Army of the Dead is weird because it's like a heist series of films. There's one called Army of the Dead, and then there's Army of Thieves.
Yeah, there's it had a prequel series
Yes.
of basically some of the, like, pulling in some of the characters.
I think the Safecracker in particular.
I watched the first episode and I was like, I'm interested. And then I haven't watched the rest yet.
Yeah.
Maybe I will one day.
Here's the weird thing about
Maybe this will be my motivation.
in Army of Thieves, no zombies. It's
Right,
just-
it's a prequel.
Right. The Army of Dead happens to happen. It's a heist in a heist franchise set against the backdrop of a zombie outbreak. But Army of Thieves doesn't have the zombies in it. I think they put like little hooks, like news reports and things.
Right, like things are starting to happen, but it's not about zombies.
Yeah, but it's like if they made a Ocean's 14 and it's during an alien invasion or something like that. They just decided to set it against a like sci-fi trope background.
You know
I think
what?
that's interesting.
You know what I think is I would take an Ocean's 14 regardless of what form it takes because I love those movies, unironically.
Did you like the all-female reboot?
I did.
You did? Was it good?
I did. Yeah. Are you kidding? Kate Blanchett and Sandra Bullock. Hoo-hoo!
Yeah, I thought it was pretty universally panned. Am I crazy for thinking that?
No, you're not crazy for thinking that. It didn't stop me from enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I think Anne Hathaway's in it and she plays like a spoiled starlet. You can tell all the characters having a great time.
Oh, no, they digitally replaced her with Tig Notaro. Do you know about that from Army of the Dead too? They replaced one of the characters.
Yeah, that was done in post. I think one of the actors was accused of misconduct or something. I don't remember the exact details.
Chris D'Elia.
Okay, and I remember there was a big deal made. They replaced his character with Tig Notaro in post, and it was a big story because it was weird. Tig Notaro was a principal character in this movie without somehow ever interacting with anyone else in the movie. It was all green screened in.
I mean, luckily, I read an article about this at the time. I think it was like a few $1 million that they paid to replace him once they decided to make the move to Tig Notaro.
Which is probably more than he even made as part of the movie,
I was
right?
thinking the same thing. It was probably more than he was paid to be in it to be in it to begin with. But the character I thought would have been easy to replace because the character is a helicopter pilot, and I don't remember in the movie Tig Notaro interacting with too many of the characters beyond the "all right, go now, come back" kind of a thing.
Right.
You know, she's waiting on a roof most of the time.
What's your zombie movie of choice?
Dude, it's one scene in particular, man. It is. I like slow zombies, so Dawn of the Dead would be a big one for me. But
So you're not going in for World War Z running zombies?
no, I did. But I'm gonna say my scene, which is the most incredible zombie scene of all time. It is the opening scene to 28 Weeks Later. That is like pulse racing cinema. That is insane. And even though I don't like fast zombies, the 28 yada yadas later, that series is probably one of my favorites of all time. I think that it was handled really well. And I don't want to hear people tell me they're not zombies.
They're zombies.
They're zombies.
There's zombies.
Get the fuck out of here with that discussion.
It's rage, whatever. They're zombies.
Yeah.
They're mushrooms, whatever. They're zombies.
They're zombies. They're all zombies. It's all the same thing.
It's zombies all the way down.
I think that's the thing about George Romero, right? George Romero?
Yeah.
I always mix him up with John Romero.
John Romero,
the id
yeah.
guy, yeah. George Romero making this new kind of monster. It's not that they're undead zombies. That's not the thing. It's that basically suddenly something happens and the whole world of humans is against a small group of humans. That's the thing, right? That's the thing.
It's the idea that humans become not humans, and if you get infected, you also become part of this thing. It's not. It's the whole like, oh, they have to die
Undead,
before they come back
yeah.
to life, or oh, they got infected by a mushroom and until they get taken over. Whatever. They're all zombies.
And that your group of human survivors could turn against you at any moment in time.
Right.
That's the whole thing. And then the little skin on it, if you will, the little cosmetic that you downloaded to put on it, is they're either undead or they're infected or
they're
they're
freakers.
mushrooms or they're freakers or whatever.
All right. Well, I want to know what everyone's favorite zombie movie is. It's the spooky season,
Welcome
so
to
this
our
is very appropriate.
Army of Dead podcast.
I would also like to say a big thank you to River and Ricky for sponsoring this episode of our show at patreon.com/morningsomewhere. You can also sponsor this show at patreon.com/morningsomewhere.
And in our link dump today, we will be putting up some links to some resources if you would like to donate for people who are recovering from both Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. All right, well, that does it for us today, October 10th, 2024. We will be back to talk to you tomorrow. We hope you will be here as well.
Bye, everybody.